that happens. Let's actually at least get the video part. All right. So first introduction first, and also picking up this thing. So my name is Minty. So you might have remembered a bit some of my work back in 2013, Project on the Cloud, Good Morning Baltimore, Luna's Determination, The Fall of Sunset Shimmer, The Beginning of Harmony, but also a special effects work for Aquaman, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, a Retimer, the Joan of Arc miniseries, and stuff I still have under an NDA. So that's one of the things you have with the industry. There's a lot of things I would love to talk about right now that I am not allowed to, but that happens. The fact that I have to keep those secrets is very important because spoilers for movies that haven't been released kind of ruins the whole thing for everybody. So talking about spoilers, I think we're going to start with the preview of Missing Out, the project of the Starlight Dimmer project I've been working on for a while. So tab 2. I will warn you, it's 5 minutes long. I hope the sound's going to be good. And enjoy.
Hey, Spike, have you seen Starlight? I can't find her anywhere.
I think she went to the library.
Thanks, Spike.
No, Twilight. The old one. I think she's been there a lot lately. Maybe you should go check out if she's alright.
Starlight.
Oh, I didn't want you to see it now. It's still incomplete. I couldn't figure out yet what the tree looks like from the back.
Are you kidding me? That looks incredible. You should be proud of your work. Wait, I clearly remember this door opening the other way.
What? But the door is clearly meant to be opened this way.
Oh, right. You were never there when the library was still standing. The door used to open this way, but the old librarian who lived here before me made it into a regular door.
I didn't know that.
Starlight!
I guess I screwed up. I wanted this to be perfect, and I couldn't get it right at all.
It's not such a big deal. I'm sure the others will still appreciate it. Hey, I remember that photo. Princess Celestia wanted a nice picture of all of us she could frame in Canterlot, and... It's not because you missed out on the memories of the tree. It's because you're missing on them, right?
So I want to start out with the very, very simple question. Why fan animation? It's quite interesting because fan animation is not something new. For example, a lot of us can remember browsing the web looking at Flash animation back in the early 2000s. This is not even that early. There was, there's some, for example, I think the earliest fan animation I can think of is from 1969, and it's called Bambi Meets Godzilla. I won't show the whole thing because it's pretty long and we only have an hour. And also, I kind of feel like you should watch it on your own. It's all made by Marv Newland. And the story says that he made the whole thing in a rush because he was helping other animators at his school, and he had to figure out how to make 1 minute of animation for his homework, and that became a classic. So back in the days, at that time, for example, if you wanted to do a fan animation, you had, for example, if you wanted to do it on paper or stop motion, you had to actually get it on film. It was very expensive, just getting that, and that's excluding the equipment, all the paper, pencils, the camera, and you look at that and you're thinking, well, if I want to create something that I want to show people, it will get expensive. It could also go smaller with some flip books, but the reach is a lot smaller. Just the idea to get all your family around your tiny flip book showing that, it wouldn't be the same. And if you wanted to go, for example, computer animation, you'd go, for example, an SGI workstation, but it's not given. It's not something you can really reasonably ask for Christmas. Those computers were really top-notch. That's what they used for special effects for movies back in the 90s. That's what they used to build the Nintendo 64. It's a classic. I would love to be able to own one of those machines just to be able to look at it. It just looks incredible. But thankfully, with the 2000s, the idea of animation by fans, small creators, is incredible. The idea that it's democratized is incredible. One of the things, for example, we have two things. The fact that we have Flash for desktop computers, and by desktop computers I mean off-the-shelf computers, and Maya in the 2000s, actually 1999. The idea that it could run on Intel processors, and by off-the-shelf I mean it. Of course, at the time the internet still sounded a bit like this. So the reach for, when you wanted to reach for animation, you couldn't do a lot. But you would have, for example, you would be able to have, for example, just make a very small animation. You could share it to people online. It was incredible. Flash animation, the idea. It's called SWF for the files that you share. It stands for small web file. Instead of actually sharing the pictures generated by the software, you would share the routines that would generate the picture, which was a lot smaller. You could make video games since it was interactive. You could make whole websites. You could make your own fan animation. A lot of people, what they would do is they would cut out sprites from video games and animate them, and they would make their own crossover. It was incredible at the time, and just like Bambi versus meets Godzilla, its crossovers are incredibly popular. I don't know why, but if it works. But that's the thing with off the shelf. It means that you can go at a Best Buy, skip the phone aisle, get the cheapest laptop you can find for $200. Install Blender for free because Blender is free. That's the one thing everybody who uses Blender will tell you. It is free. And of course, since it's a laptop, never ever use a touchpad. Use a mouse. No matter how bad it is, it's going to be better than a touchpad. And with that, you can get started. It won't be a very fast computer, but you can do incredible things with limited resources. And the fandom has shown that. It's just downright incredible. So now we're going to talk about how we can get started. And I won't cover all the fine details because I only have an hour. And also, I don't want to be too technical. I kept telling myself more ponies, less technical. So Step 1, or step 0, because I started with step 1, I forgot a step. And to quote another video, and the idea of having ideas for fan animations is quite interesting, because you would think, well, I just like a character, I'm going to do something about the character, but I think it can be a lot more. For example, with Luna's determination, a lot of it was drawn to me. I was growing up, I realized that I was losing, people that I cared deeply about, just the idea of losing them, and also thinking of the legacy that they left on other people, and the gap that they leave when they leave. It was what really inspired the project. The Fall of Sunset Shimmer was a lot inspired by me at school, trying to make friends. Just the idea that friends, people treat it like something that you should already know how to make, but it's not really a science you can teach, and something that I felt like the show didn't tackle a lot. The beginning of Harmony, which is very, very massive in scale, is more of a reflection of the Brony fandom in 2019, when they announced that BronyCon would do their last one. The idea that you would lose a whole culture, and the idea with Celestia trying to grasp at some survivor, trying to grasp at it, only to realize that she would need to make it continue on her own and keep the spirit. And there is missing out, which is a lot. It's a lot of a reflection of nostalgia, not really the good part of nostalgia, more how nostalgia can be toxic. And I think it's very interesting, because with those ideas, it goes a lot deeper than just going with the characters that are already, the way that we already explored them in the show. It really helps to define it with something that matters a lot to us. And it really helps, because that way, if you have something you really want to tell that feels deeply personal, it feels a lot more important for you to actually get it completed, and you actually have a goal to get to something that reach a final destination. So that's about it. So step 1, screenplay sometimes, and I'm gonna go with a disclaimer. I'm not a writer. This is not a writing panel. Go ask someone else, probably Silver Quill. Yesterday he did an incredible panel about villains that I loved, and unfortunately we don't have time traveling, so he did film it. And that's quite interesting, because I talk about steps, but the idea that you can do steps in parallel, because of course the idea of multitasking is important, and the idea also that you have at some point you're going to hit a spot where you can't continue the script because you're struggling to find the right spot, or you might want the feedback of someone else. So you have other steps you can do. You can do character rigs for set characters. If it's about Sunset Shimmer, you can get started with Sunset Shimmer rig, because it's about her. You can also get started with Celestia, because in my case I needed her. Establishing shot for 2D backgrounds. You might not know where exactly you're going to look at if you, for example, you have a dialogue between two characters, but the establishing shot is going to be sure if you know that you're going to need Canterlot. You can do the whole view, the whole massive view of Canterlot that they have. I remember vectoring it a while back, and I think it took 3 days, and I still had some spots that were leaving to be desired. You can also do all the 3D environments. Since the camera can go in all spaces, you can actually have a whole environment you can play around, and it also helps to get a good idea of what kind of scale you have for the environment. You can start casting VAs if you, of course, if I need Sunset Shimmer, I could go find the actresses I think could play Sunset Shimmer. I could go with the look tests, and I could go with the panicking, because that's the spot when you realize, oh, my script might be a bit too long, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that tall, and then I realize, oh, I could. And look test is pretty interesting, because what you do is that if you already start with 3D renders and you start with your rigs, you can just start rendering things out of random and just start throwing things in Photoshop just to get a good idea of how it's going to look. It helps a lot to set the mood you want to set. Those were rejected concept art for missing out. For example, this one on the top right was a test for volumetric lights from stained glasses. getting it to color properly was quite a struggle, so getting it right at first was very important. The bottom right was just trying the first houses to see how they will look with 3D with the lighting with Ponyville, and it was a good start. And top left was testing rendering in Arnold, which deemed to be very, very bad as an idea because it took like 45 minutes a single frame, which was not reasonable for 15 minutes of animation, 24 frames per second. And eventually I found a look test that looked just right for the mood. With this projector, doesn't give it the best justice, but it was a good idea of what I wanted as a look. So now we're at step 2, storyboard / animatic. I'm talking about board driven because remember when I said sometimes the screenplay? That's what I mean. There's two different ways to approach animation. There's board driven and script driven. The idea of that is that if you have the story that you want to tell with the board driven, you start drawing it right away. It works a lot. It works great for small comedies because you can have something that punches well. You can use the actual language of the language of cinema to actually show things happen that are funny. It works also for music animations because it's kind of hard to write a script for music animation because the dialogue is, well, unless you have something that's fully instrumental, the dialogue is already written. So you can make an outline, but that's not really a script. And you have script driven, which the show is, because it's a lot better with dialogue. It's easier to rewrite because Hasbro would always give them some notes of what they would or wouldn't want. It fits better drama because you can actually go with something that's more intricate. And it fits longer projects because, of course, with the scale and all the need to do retakes, it would be incredibly difficult to do it board driven. And you would think, well, I might want to go with one side or the other. There's probably one that is better than the other, and that's the thing. I didn't stick to one side. With Luna's determination in the beginning of Harmony, both, since they were all driven by music, I wanted to make sure the music would fit perfectly with the animation. So instead of writing a script, I just went straight with the animatic. And script driven with the Fall, Sense and Shimmer and Missing Out, since they both had a lot of dialogue. So, and both work. If you can find the one that matters the most to you, or sometimes you might do a hybrid one where you would write down the script for the whole outline, but you would have some scenes that would be completely board driven because they would feel better board driven. You can do that. There's no animation police. When they talk about the 12 principles of animation, they're not laws either. Nobody's going to arrest you for that, no matter what animation reviewers are going to try to tell you. And when I talk about animatic, it doesn't need to be very complex. One of the examples I gave at HarmonyCon, which is hilarious, was this one. You have the establishing shots, which are easy to do, but this part is just me just drawing the most simple of ponies. There's no fill colors. The lighting is as simple as it gets. The dialogue is not even recorded, so it just sticks on the screen. But it gives a really good idea of what I want to do and how it's going to be set. And that way, for example, if I want to reject a shot because, for example, I realize that it doesn't feel right, I can just draw it out. It's very easy to get rid of. And sometimes it's just that, just to test how... And you're showing that, you're thinking, well, it looks really bad. How am I going to make sure that people are going to get it? And people are getting it. They get what's going on. For example, this one was more of a render test because I realized that it was pretty tricky to get the projector to look right, which sometimes you have to skip a few steps, and sometimes it looks like that. If it gets the point across and it helps you to make sure that the animation flows well, for example, the 180 rule, the idea that you have the camera always on one side, so you don't get too confused between two sides of the dialogue, it helps a lot. And you look at that and you're thinking, well, you can also do a lot of other steps during step 2. So character rigs for every character, because you already had the character rigs for the main characters. You might have some characters that are just in the background that don't really contribute in terms of dialogue, but you might want still to be there. You can record lines with VAs. I don't mean recording lines by for VAs, because one thing that I really recommend to people is that if they want to drive their point across with the voice acting, they want the voice acting to be good. They want the voice actors to know exactly what's the condition of how the character talks. And the best way to do that, thanks to the internet, because of course you don't want to drive there to reach the VA, get into a Skype or Discord call with the VA to actually give the line to have a good idea of the direction. For example, if you have a scene where you have two characters talking together, if you go and give the other line, or sometimes you might be able to get more than one VA together, but if you have the line to react to, you get a lot, something that's a lot more realistic. It feels a lot better to have a character that reacts with the right timing, with the right emotion. You don't feel like you have two disjointed characters talking. One of the examples I can think of is the infamous Dusk's Dawn, where the characters, when they talk, you can clearly tell, and it's in part because of the timing with the lines, but you can clearly tell that the voice actors recorded their lines separately and probably also did that without someone directing them. And also you think, well, I might just give the lines very specific, specify what I want and receive it back. And the thing is that you're going to get back and forth, and the back and forth will take longer than just recording. I remember with Anna Chloe M, the voicing Celestia for the False Sunset Shimmer, and also voicing Starlit Glimmer for Missing Out. One of the things that was a bit of a struggle, but we figured out a proper way. Time zones were kind of annoying, so I just had to wake up super early. It happens. You can start editing the animation because you have all the clips of the animatic that you start making out of the storyboards, and you can start editing it to have a good idea of the timing. You can put some temp music to have a good idea of the tone. I put some temp music that didn't end up in the project that I just found on YouTube from other videos, from scores from movies, and it worked great to set the tone I wanted to set. And also I could show that to the musician, because you can also start talking about the music with the musician. You might not want to have the cues, the music that are very dependent on, because with MLB, what William Anderson did with the music is that it depends a lot of animation cues. For example, when Rarity would start talking, the cues of her type of music would start at that point, and it would be really dependent on that. You would need voice acting right, you would need the animation. But at least when you start at least getting a good idea of what you want to talk about with the music at that step is pretty good. This slide intentionally left blank. Posing and layout. So when you start and you have a rig for a character that, because for example Flash rigs, you want to start animating it. One of the things that I remember a lot back in the early days of the fandom, people looked at the character rig and they just started just animating the eyes blinking, with the mouth, maybe putting a hoof up when they were talking. And the thing is that people don't go like this. People actually go and they actually have a very dynamic pose. Just the fact that right now I'm slightly at an angle is very important. Doing poses with some really feel of acting, you can look, for example, at how movies handle it. One of the things that really helped me when I was, it was actually before I started animating, I had some theater classes. And mostly in my case, it was just because I wanted to just break the ice and actually be able to talk to people, because I was a very massive introvert. But it helped a lot, and one of the things that we talked about was the clear staging, the idea, for example, that you would look directly at the audience, at least at an angle where you would see your face and your expressions, instead of going, which I did for my photo in secondary 2. We had the regular photo and the funny photo, and I just turned my head, and people realized, oh, that's kind of the funniest thing ever. I need to find back that photo. And but posing and layout is just doing the key poses that just define what the animation is going to be like. So if you go, for example, you reach for something, so you start with the pose before reaching, the pose where you're reaching, and maybe the pose where you're bringing back something. One of the example I can give, it looks a bit like this. the most complex thing ever. You mostly just put things together. Some of the rig might be broken in some frames, which you get fixed later. But it's a good start. You have a good idea of the intention of the animation, what you want to actually get done. Things you can start during step 2. You can actually start the 2D backgrounds, because you saw earlier with the animation, the angle of the camera was already set. So you can now start making the background for that shot. And you also, since you have a good idea of the pose where the character will be, you won't put the important things of the background behind the character, because it will be pointless. You can start editing those clips with the poses back in your timeline. You can start putting effects, starting at least researching how to do some effects. For example, the magic effects, which are pretty tricky sometimes. And step 4, animating the thing, because of course. So the thing is that when you go with the animation, the idea that you have those poses, they talk a lot about in-betweening, the idea that you have, you go from one pose to the other. And I think a lot of people, when they think of in-betweening, they think a lot of it of putting it at the middle, and that's kind of not the idea. It's really the idea that you have to go with the movement and make it flow properly. With the idea, for example, if you have easing, if you start slow and you end fast, you won't put your middle keyframe at the middle point. You might put it earlier. For example, if you have something that curves, for example, my arm, if you look at how it's going to go from one point to the other, it will actually curve, because it can't really do much more. Of course, if I also bend this part, it will go straight, but people don't go with those movements. People are not creepy robots, at least not most people. And you don't want ponies that are creepy robots either. Maybe if you do something like Sweetie Butt, you might do that, but that's not the point. You can also look at how you go with acting, because some characters, the way that they move will not only depend on the laws of physics, but also the way that they're trying to go with their acting. For example, Pinkie Pie, she kind of breaks the rules of gravity when she moves. She's very bouncy. The fact that she stretches a lot more than other characters. You can also define how you will approach going with the in-betweening. That might also change the way that you do the poses. So you go from what we had earlier, and you can see that how the pieces, you don't actually go in a straight line. And you can see a couple of other things that I didn't think of mentioning earlier. Blinking, characters blink. One of the examples I give that is not 100% of the time, but when people turn their heads, they will tend to blink a lot. Partly because our brains will help filter out the garbage information that we get when you turn our heads too fast. Partly because just the air just going in the eyes can dry them up a bit, so naturally you might go and blink. People will blink also when they change their mind or they have a new thought. People will blink just because they have to blink. And putting that at the right timing really helps to sell the animation. Unlike some shows that I won't name that are somewhat lazy, where you have the characters that don't even blink, they just talk. Sometimes they put a hand up. Just the fact that you have characters that blink, and sometimes they change a bit their pose, for example, because when they talk, they might want to go with a different pose that put a different emphasis on what they're talking about. Sometimes it's just that they're moving a bit just to not stay static for the whole time, because they want to go in a more relaxed position. Like right now, I'm shifting my weight from one leg to the other because I've been standing up for the whole panel because it feels weird standing down when you're the only one. I've done that at another panel and it was really weird. So you had that step. Step 5, compositing, and no, animating is not the last step. We have a lot of things. You have because you have software, for example, like Adobe After Effects, which is now owned by the same people as Flash, so there is it's actually compatible with it. It does a lot of things that really help. For example, the magic effects. When you have the whole thing with the magic, instead of actually just drawing every frame to get the outline. They just have a recipe that they reuse all the time, and it just happens to look exactly like the one that the unicorns use in terms of color and look, and they add sparkles over that. But it's a lot less trouble. It's as some people describe it, automate the pain away, because I would never want to do that. It's painful. You have other effects, for example, that you can also use. For example, the crystal ponies were done like that. And I found out that we're using After Effects for that when I realized that the cell pattern, all the crystals that they have, is a default plugin in After Effects. It's incredible. So it's also pretty interesting because Flash can't do transparency as a whole for objects when they're as graphic symbols. So you need to actually do it in After Effects anyway. And you can also add some sparkles, some glows to make them kind of crystal-y. You can do other stuff, for example, the perspective effect and that bloom effect. Instead of actually just bringing and importing all the Flash files for all those scenes, you can just import the video clip, put it in an angle, and just animating it going there. You can put some bloom to make it feel otherworldly. And you can do that in Flash easily. Or, you might think, okay, that's not a lot. You have mostly flat colors, you have something, and you're thinking, well, for my animation, I'm thinking, well, could I push it, look a bit more interesting? And you could actually split all the matte painting in multiple layers, the characters in multiple layers. You have the beauty layer with the flat colors, the eye pass where it's just a map where it's just the eye, where you have the sclera in red, you have the eye shine in blue, and you have the eye reflection at the bottom in yellow. You have the outline, which is literally just the outline if you want to split it. For example, if you want to brighten it to make some kind of rim light. And you get something that could look like this, which looks a lot more movie-like. It's a lot more interesting to look at. So you can see a bit, you have the rim light in the character that comes from the moon. That is done by taking the outline, just cutting it with the mask of the body of the character to just get the outline on one side. You have the glow on the unicorn, the alicorn on the right. That was done with the default plugin. It's called Saber. They use that to make a lightsaber effect. So, as it turns out, you can actually just draw a mask around objects and just get that glow. You have a bit of bloom. Actually, you have a bit of color correction to match the background. Flash can do that, but if you want to keep the spot of light in the eye, you can do that in compositing easier. You have some reflection in the ground with some blur and displacement, because you don't have a perfectly flat surface. You have some tiles, and just it's kind of hard to show with the projector, but just being able to have the displacement around the corners really helped to make it look better. And you have dash shot to render it. You put it back in your editing. It looks incredible. Some people, what they were going to do with their animation is that instead of animating in Flash or Toon Boom and then compositing in After Effects, they will animate the entire thing in After Effects. I don't know how they can handle it. I would lose my mind. For example, there was Two Snacks. There was Brony Dance Party who used to do that. I'm probably skipping a lot of people who do that. It can work great. One of the things that I don't recommend doing the compositing as you animate, because you kind of start losing the shape of the animation. You kind of get a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of dirt, but you feel like you're losing it through some filtering. For example, people, when they go with Instagram and they take photos and put all the filters, and you kind of lose the idea of what you're looking at. It's tricky to actually get the right balance in terms of compositing and in terms of lighting to actually get your point across and make it look good. And that happens. Step 5, releasing. So one of the things that is very important when you create an animation is that if you want to actually get it released, you can't start fighting with the tiny details that are creeping in, that you realize, oh, there's that little thing in the back, I see it. I'm pretty sure the audience is going to see it. And as it turns out they don't, or their brain filters that out, or the audience just is forgiving on that. Getting to have that peace of mind of realizing that sometimes you can do mistakes, you can have something that's not perfect that people will enjoy, and something that you you will learn from is very important to actually get the stress out when you actually get it released on YouTube. There's some perfectionists, and I totally understand the idea that you have that you want to have something that looks perfect. That's okay. We're in a fandom that's very, very forgiving of those things. It's okay. Just make it as good as you can. Make something you're proud of. Make something that people will enjoy. Then don't worry too much about the fine details. We're not a studio. We're not Hollywood. Well, technically I am, but that's more my job, and the pony fandom is a side gig. And I think with a hobbyists are not gonna be at the level of making people redo their work entirely just because they don't like it. I've seen some people like that, and they're not seen as the good guys. Step 5 again, because I kind of forgot to change the number and I'm feeling stupid. Postmortem. I'm going to show a clip from a movie I really enjoyed that shows a bit how you might feel after releasing an animation.
So we're going to be working together? Really? Worst film you ever saw? Well, my next one will be better. Hello? Hello?
This is how it's pretty important to look back at your animation and just look at what you can improve for your next one. You might realize, oh, I could have done that. And you might think, well, I could pull it out from YouTube, fix that, put it back in YouTube. And it's going to be a very bad cycle of having to polish something that has been polished enough for people, which you could actually put as a time for other projects where you could actually, and it's very important because even I as a creator, I release one thing a year, and I feel I could try to release a bit more, not once a month because it might be a bit too much, but the idea that you can learn from your mistakes, find other stuff, and you can actually have new projects to look back with the previous one to actually compare your change in terms of skills. It's very good. It's something that I consider great. As a fandom, it feels great seeing artists look back at their old work and they compare how much they improved. It feels good when you look back, for example, because I've been in fandom since 2013, so comparing what I could do back in 2013, which was, I wouldn't say pitiful, but the small me, which was about that height because I was already an adult, at that time it felt like it was the most I could do. And right now I think that what I am doing with Missing Out is the most I can do, but in 10 years, I could say the other way around. So I think we're going to go with Q&A. You got any questions or topics that you want me to cover? Yeah.
So, if you want to start animation, would you recommend Toon Boom?
So Toon Boom is very interesting. It has a weird learning curve. The way that it works is very different from Flash. For example, the way it handles symbols, because Flash has a symbol library which is shared within the Flash file. And Harmony has a symbol library which is shared with the whole computer. And when you create a new one, it's not it's an entirely new copy. It's a very different approach. For example, if you're the kind who wants to draw a lot, Toon Boom is really good for that. For rigged animation, it's a bit trickier. But the thing is that Toon Boom can do, unlike Flash, are downright incredible. For example, Flash, if you have a character with legs, the legs are separate from the body, and if you move the body, the legs won't follow. So trying to get the two to follow together will be really annoying. But with someone who learns Flash, it's going to be pretty easy. With Toon Boom, what it happens is that you can actually put a link between that as a peg. So you have the body who basically has the whole, the rest of the legs following, and it helps a lot. But the thing is that you then have to figure out if you have an animation of a character who stands on their leg and you want, for example, the leg not to follow the body but the other way around, you have to work in consequence for that. So it's really weird balance where you have a lot more in terms of features, but you also have to give it a bit more. But for hand-drawn animation, it's so much better than Flash because the brushes in Toon Boom are incredible. Flash has, since it's software from the 90s that were made for very old computers, and they kind of didn't think of much of it. The brush will sometimes, as you try to draw, and go back, and you lose your entire brush stroke. You might have to fix it yourself afterwards. If you want to color in, Flash is gotten better, but Toon Boom is a tool that has a set of colors for the rig, and if you realize, oh, I want to change the color and I want it to affect the whole scene, you can just change that color and it affects the color for the whole scene, which is kind of annoying when it breaks, but when it doesn't, it's incredible. You have Flash, which started to do that, but still not perfect, and I think it's broken if you try to import it a different scene. So usually you just go with a single color per object. So if you have to recolor an entire rig, you have to use the find and replace feature, which is incredibly slow. So, and of course, Toon Boom also comes with compositing elements that Flash lacks. You can, at least for premium and I think advanced. So you can have, for example, glows around the characters, all the compositing effects I was talking about. You can skip After Effects entirely. It takes a bit longer to render, but it's really good. So I recommend it if you want to give it a try. There's, I think, a 21-day trial for both. Although I think Flash, what they did was now they reduced it to 7 days, which isn't a lot. So get yourself a good weekend to get started, because there's not a lot. Unless you have multiple computers and just download the trial for each one. I don't recommend that. It's going to get expensive in computers. Any other questions? Yeah.
Would you recommend Adobe Animate?
Oh, Adobe Animate. Well, the thing is that as some people don't really realize, because Adobe has tried to save a bit Flash by just renaming it Animate. It's the same software. I don't think it's that bad of the software. It has a lot of broken things, but if you want to do a pony rig and you don't, you know exactly what you want to do, it works great. It has a lot of features that just work great at the time. Of course, there's some that are kind of annoying. For example, the lightweight feature, the way that, for example, if you want a pointy line, now they added a tool for that. But the line itself is going to be a bit flickery, and you have to fight a bit to get the weight right. Sometimes it's really just getting the cursor to actually hold the point, because it's really finicky. It's kind of annoying, but you can get around with that. What's good with Animate is that since it's a subscription service, it also comes with Premiere Pro, After Effects. You already have Flash, Photoshop, Illustrator if you want to do fancier vectors. You have Adobe Audition. You have Adobe Bridge. There's another version of Animate which is completely different, which I don't recommend, but it has that. So it has a lot to offer. I personally, it's more of I recommend people to try it to see if they like it, because it's a lot. Depends a lot on people's workflow, the way that they look at animation. So, for example, Harmony was great for me because I could have an entire spaghetti of wires plugged just to get the rig working, and that way I could move the neck and have the head following. I could have the head in 3D space, so I could actually do very subtle head movements, and it was perfect for me the way that my mind looked at it, and that way I can't really say that one is superior in that front. Although I think Harmony is cheaper and with license, and they also offer perpetual license, because nowadays with Adobe, what they do is that they only offer subscription service, which is pretty annoying. And of course, there's other software like Blender, which now supports 2D animation for free, because Blender is free. So yeah.
When you start working on a project, do you give yourself deadlines for the different steps, or is it just kind of like whatever feels right?
Well, since it's in it's fandom projects, I try to give myself deadlines in terms of just a rough idea of how long it's going to take. With missing out, the deadline I told myself was it's going to take a year max. It's been more than a year, and I realized that, and I realized that I have to gauge a bit better how much time I take. But there was also COVID that happened, so I realized, that might have affected it a bit. And yeah, that's one of the things. At least having a good idea of how long you expect it to take, because you might at some point realize I can't fight too much with those details anymore because I have something to release. I told people that we'll release it, and I don't want to make I don't want to delay it too much. So yeah.
Yes, sir. In terms of posing, how do you choose and go about your poses, and is there such a thing as them being too dynamic?
You can go with something too dynamic. For example, if we had at some point we had when I started the Creativity Kitchen, we had some animations where we tried to make very intricate posing, and I wanted to get all the body parts working. I wanted to have the hair flowing, and the thing is that you started losing the actual motion. You started losing the actual. You actually started losing the actual point of the animation. It was really like every frame, everything would move at once, and it was really annoying. You need to focus on what you want to look at first. For example, if you have a character with their horn and you want people to look at their horn, you don't have to worry too much about the bat legs. Just make sure that the horn is properly posed, and you want to make sure the motion is also something you want to follow. You can help also with other things like the lighting or the way that you frame it in the screen. You can put it in the middle of the frame. You don't have to worry too much about hair either, because you want, for example, to have hair to animate frame by frame to make it flow a lot. But in reality, hair is a lot more stiff than that. So you might just want to focus and try to make it flow only for important scenes. Taking, for example, the shot where you had Twilight. It's a classic one in the Crystal Empire Part 1, and you see the main flow. It's incredible, and they only used that for that one shot, and it was all right. It's exactly what we needed. And of course, you have some scenes when you have just dialogue between two characters, and you don't want to put all your resources on that, because you have much more important scenes that require a lot more animation. So if you have shots of just character talking, you make them blink, and you just have them move a bit, that's fine. Like that's for example, and for anime they have lots of scenes where it's just characters talking to just keep the budget for the fight scenes. And of course, since we're low budget animators, since we only do that as a hobby, we have to realize we have to cut a bit back because we have to put resources in the right place. For example, and when it comes to posing, it's also the case. You have cases where you have maybe too many poses for an animation. You start to lose the whole point, and it becomes distracting. And finding the right balance too, because you don't want to also have characters who are just standing there and just not moving at all. Because it's called animation. It's supposed to animate. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? Yeah.
For someone just starting like as a hobby and maybe doesn't have a big budget, for music, do you recommend just like trying to find someone who's willing to do music for it, or using music that's already out there and getting permission?
You can do both. What I did for the false that's at Shimmer, I first reached for Radiarch, who also reached to Seventh Element, who really helped to get some music. When I went with Luna's Determination, I actually went with something that was already existing, because at that time I didn't really have enough to show myself to actually prove to other musicians that I could do something that could deliver. Because of course, if you want to work on a project, a lot of people think, well, I would love to work with you, but is the project going to get released? We had a lot of things that didn't get released. For example, Journey of the Spark had a lot of music done for it, and it never got released. I think part of the scope was just too big, and some musicians might lose a bit their fate, just the idea that they have something that sounds good, but you realize it won't get done, and they might not be able to join in. So that's one of the tricky parts. Of course, you can also go, and that's one of the problems with YouTube. If you go with commercial music, you will get slammed, and sometimes they will go and just demonetize it, and that's fine. the video is still going to be up, but sometimes they will just take down the whole video. It's more common when you take if you take an actual video clip that also has music. It's pretty annoying. And I think with the Brony fandom, we have a lot of creators who want to collaborate with other people. So sometimes you might find musicians who already did a piece that you really want, so you can reach for that. And sometimes they might ask for some promotion and something that feels mutually beneficial. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
How long have you been animating?
Oh, so I want to say I started back in 2008, although I wasn't very good in 2008. I was just doing Flash animation because my dad had a disc for Flash 7, and I realized, well, I could just try to move some characters around, and I already had sprites of video games from, it was still called sprites.fireball20xl.com, and I mostly just did stuff around video games I liked. But before that, I tried to do animation with PowerPoint, and the idea was that I would just go and put a different slide for a different frame. Sometimes I would maybe use the transition effects to be able to do some fancier things. But that's kind of what I did, and I think when I was a kid, my dad had a ThinkPad with PowerPoint on it, and I think the first animation I did when I realized I could actually get something that I could actually draw myself and put on screen. It was a very simple story. It was not like the pinnacle of storytelling. It was just about a guy who wanted to enter a race, so he just entered the race and he won. And I showed that to my parents, and it was foreshadowing. They realized that I love computer things, I love animation, I love to make things to show them, and at the end, well, I'm here, so yeah.
Are you done? Is that okay?
Nobody else?
Okay, sorry, I looked over and said yes. I was
Well, maybe there's someone else behind you want to.
Yeah, this is a quick one. If you're just like wanting, like, if you're going to water, what do you think an appropriate size first project is? Because obviously I would not try something like that until you build up to the experience.
Yeah, never do that. I've seen some people, they had very high ambitions for their first projects. My first project in the fandom, well, technically second, because my first was just animating Apple Bloom based on storyboards I found. I wouldn't say leaked online, but someone posted the storyboards on Twitter, and I just thought, well, let's try to make it on my own. It was just a very simple shot of Apple Bloom, and I already had the dialogue from the show. But my first actual project was Project Thundercloud, which was maybe 13 shots in 4 months. It wasn't too ambitious, and since it relied on off-screen dialogue, and yeah, I got 5 minutes. So since it relied on off-screen dialogue, I didn't have to worry too much about lip syncing. I could actually go and just animate shots the way I thought I could, in a way that I would learn around it. I would really recommend to go with something that's small, that you can expand on if you find a bit more skills along the way, but not something too big. Maybe something like a minute. You could always go with, I wouldn't go with a music video first. Some people, what they do when they start is animation memes, where it's maybe 30 seconds long. It's mostly just based on loops. So reusing the same animation, show that you can just do one animation just works great once and just go with it. Yeah, it's because 15 minutes of animation, like my current project, I would never start with that. I tried doing that back in the days with sprite animation, and I did it and I completed it, but it was garbage. Like just mostly just dialogue with sprites just moving the screen, and they were not even moving great. So yeah, it's kind of a hard balance of having just something that's small enough, but you feel like you've done a lot, and something that you can actually show to people. So I would go and start small. Any other question? That's awesome.
Oh, it's okay. I already asked them. Someone else has it.
I mean,
Okay, then I'll go.
yeah, go ahead.
When you're doing multiple projects, like how do you find time to work on all of them? Or do you ever just say, this is Saturday, I'm just going to work like a ton of hours on one project and we just go through it?
It's a lot of discipline. You have to realize, I have to work on a couple of projects at once. What I did with the BABSCon promos, what I realized was I have to put my very personal pony project on pause. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna feel like I haven't done anything of worth, but I have to get it completed before the deadline need me, and that's mostly the approach I go. Sometimes I would just go and dedicate the time because I realize that there's a deadline. Sometimes it's mostly just spare time that I can't spend this project because there's something in the way. Trying to find the right balance is also pretty tricky. It's really trying to schedule things. There's also, in my case, since I have a job, I have to balance it, and of course, since I already have schedule to follow with my job, it's not that much of an issue, but I don't want also, because I realize if I work on my pony projects too late at night, I won't have enough sleep, and it might actually be very damaging for my job. And if I don't have a job, I can't finance my pony project. So in a way, it's also very important. I also have another project I have to work on, and because of BABSCon, I realized I don't have a lot of time I can put on it. I had to tell people, sorry, I don't have enough time. I'll try to help the week after. And now that I said, I'm gonna work on it next week, I kind of made a promise, so I'm gonna have to follow it. So a lot of self-discipline, a lot of organization, and sometimes just being clever and trying to maximize the time you have. And of course, I say that, but you also have to put some time for yourself. Sometimes you might need to clean, for example, I need to clean my apartment, play some video games for some mental health, because working on pony projects, it's a hobby, but it's also a bit draining just doing that all the time. So it's a very tricky balance. We're running out of time. So we have fan animation at 4:45 p.m. at Solar Hall. I'm gonna be there. There's gonna be Argo. There's gonna be EG, and it's gonna be good. It's an hour and a half, so we'll be able to show a couple more things. I hope you'll be there, and I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you have a great rest of BABSCon.